Rome, 73 BC. The Colosseum roars as Maximus stands victorious, blood-soaked sand beneath his feet. His opponent lies dead, and with this final kill, he has earned what few gladiators ever taste: freedom. The wooden rudis sword placed in his calloused hands marks the end of his servitude. Yet 3 months later he kneels before a slave trader, voluntarily surrendering the liberty he fought 7 years to achieve. All for her, Livia Antonius, the senator's daughter, now stripped of her nobility and condemned to servitude after a treasonous accusation. Could he truly protect her in a city where emperors themselves aren't safe from daggers in the dark? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crowd's roar washed over Maximus like a physical force. Sweat stung his eyes as he circled his opponent in the blood-soaked arena. 7 years of his life had led to this moment. His 30th victory and the potential for freedom. His opponent, a massive Numidian with skin like polished ebony, brandished a curved blade. They called him the Shadow for his uncanny ability to survive. Today, only one of them would leave the arena. Maximus adjusted his grip on his gladius. The weight of his helmet pressed down, its bronze wolf decoration, the emblem that had earned him the name, the Wolf of Thrace, catching the afternoon sun. His muscles ached from earlier matches, but freedom was worth the pain. Remember, Wolf, Atticus had told him that morning, the old gladiators face a map of scars and wisdom. He favors his right side. A man that size, he'll tire before you. Patience. The Numidian lunged, his blade slicing air where Maximus had stood a heartbeat before. The crowd gasped at the near miss, then cheered as Maximus countered, drawing first blood from his opponent's arm. "They're not cheering for you," Atticus always said. "They're cheering for death. Never forget that." The Numidian's eyes narrowed above his mask. He was a champion too, a man who'd spilled enough blood to fill a bath. They shared that bond, if nothing else. Men turned into weapons for Rome's entertainment. 3 more passes, 3 more exchanges of steel and skill. Maximus felt the rhythm of the fight, the dance of death he'd mastered through countless battles. The Numidian was slowing, his massive frame requiring more oxygen than Maximus's leaner build. The opening came during the Numidian's powerful but predictable overhead strike. Maximus stepped inside the arc of the blow, too close for the curved blade to find purchase. His own gladius slid between ribs with practiced precision. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between warriors. The Numidian nodded slightly as his lifeblood spilled onto the sand. Maximus withdrew his blade and stepped back, allowing his opponent the dignity of standing as he died. The Numidian dropped to his knees, then fell forward. The crowd erupted in ecstasy. Maximus removed his helmet and turned to face the imperial box where Sulla's representative sat watching. The dictator himself rarely attended the games anymore, preferring to send younger men to represent his authority. The young noble rose, studying Maximus with the calculated gaze of someone appraising livestock. The arena fell silent. Thumbs up. The crowd cheered their approval. But that wasn't the end. The representative held up his hand for silence. "The Wolf of Thrace has fought 30 battles and claimed 30 lives," the announcer's voice boomed. "Sulla the Fortunate, in his wisdom and mercy, grants this gladiator his freedom." A slave approached carrying a small wooden sword, the rudis. Such a small thing to represent so much. Maximus knelt as tradition demanded, accepting the symbol of his freedom. Later, in the gladiators' quarters, Atticus embraced him. The old man's eyes were wet, though he would deny it if mentioned. "You did it, Wolf. You survived." His voice cracked. "Few enough of us do." "I wouldn't have without your teaching," Maximus replied, examining the rudis in his hands. Simple wood, unadorned. Nothing special to look at, yet more precious than gold. "What will you do now?" Atticus asked, passing him a cup of watered wine. Maximus drank deeply before answering. "I don't know. I was captured at 19. I've been a gladiator longer than I was free. You could train others. Your name would draw students." Maximus shook his head. "I've seen enough blood." "Then what?" "Something quiet. Something normal. The word felt strange on his tongue. Normal. What did that even mean for a man who had killed 30 others for the entertainment of crowds? There is no normal for men like us, Wolf, Atticus said gently. But you can find peace, perhaps. That's something. Another strange concept. Maximus wondered if he would recognize it if he found it. The wooden rudis caught the lamplight. Freedom. His to keep or lose as he chose. He had no idea how soon that choice would come. Senator Marcus Antonius adjusted the heavy gold ring bearing his family seal as he listened to the morning's political debates in his atrium. The ring had belonged to his father and his grandfather before that, a symbol of the Antonius legacy stretching back to the early Republic. Sunlight streamed through the opening in the roof, illuminating the impluvium pool beneath and casting rippling reflections on the frescoed walls. The grain shipments from Sicily have been delayed again, reported Flavius, his chief steward. The third time this season. Marcus frowned. Convenient for those who've been hoarding grain to drive up prices. Indeed, Senator. Particularly convenient for Senator Cassius and his associates. Marcus nodded, his suspicions confirmed. Gaius Cassius Longinus, a man of considerable ambition and few scruples. Have our sources confirmed his involvement? Not explicitly, but the pattern is clear. Patterns aren't proof. We need documents, testimony. Marcus rubbed his temples. At 58, he felt the weight of Rome's troubles more acutely than ever. The Republic was fracturing under Sulla's dictatorship, even as the man himself grew ill and reclusive. A musical laugh interrupted his thoughts. His daughter Livia entered the atrium, scrolls tucked under her arm. At 22, she had blossomed into a woman of remarkable intelligence and beauty, with her mother's dark curls and his own penetrating gaze. "Good morning, father," she said, kissing his cheek. "You look troubled." "Politics," he replied with a tired smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." Livia raised an eyebrow. "I'm hardly a child, father. The grain shortages affect everyone, even us sheltered patrician women." Marcus exchanged a glance with Flavius, who discreetly withdrew. "You've been visiting the markets again," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "With proper escort," Livia countered. "How else am I to understand Rome if I'm confined to these walls?" She gestured at the scrolls she carried. Cicero's latest speech. Brilliant, though perhaps too direct in his criticism of Sulla's reforms. Marcus sighed. "Livia, you know I've encouraged your education more than most fathers would, but there are limits to what's prudent. Especially now." "Because of Cassius?" Her direct question startled him. "You've been listening at doors again." "I prefer gathering intelligence," she said with a smile that faded quickly. "He's dangerous, isn't he?" Marcus considered deflecting but decided against it. Livia was too perceptive. Yes. He and several others. They're using the grain supply to enrich themselves while turning the plebeians against the Senate. And against moderates like you. Precisely. He touched his ring thoughtfully. "Rome balances on a knife's edge, Livia. Sulla won't live much longer, and when he dies. Civil war?" she asked quietly. "Perhaps. Unless cooler heads prevail." He gestured to the scrolls. "Which is why I need you to be careful. Your interest in politics would be viewed as inappropriate by some." "By men like Cassius, you mean? Men who believe women should concern themselves only with weaving and bearing children." "Yes," Marcus admitted. "And such men currently hold considerable power." Livia sat beside him, her expression serious. "Then we must be circumspect, but we cannot be silent." "What are you planning, father?" He hesitated, then reached a decision. "I'm gathering evidence of their corruption. If I can prove the grain shortages are manufactured." "You could break their power," Livia finished. "How can I help?" "By being cautious," he insisted. "I've made arrangements for some sensitive documents to be delivered here. They must be transcribed quickly and the originals returned before they're missed. And you need someone trustworthy, someone in your household." Her eyes lit with understanding. "I can do it." "It's dangerous, Livia." "Everything worthwhile is," she replied, echoing one of his own frequent sayings. Besides, who would suspect a senator's daughter of political intrigue? My very irrelevance makes me invisible to men like Cassius. Marcus studied his daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Your mother would say I've corrupted you with too much philosophy and not enough proper womanly arts. Mother would understand the stakes. Livia's voice softened. 5 years since the fever had taken her mother, yet the loss remained raw. A slave appeared at the entrance to the atrium. Senator, your litter is prepared. The Senate session begins shortly. Marcus rose, straightening his toga. We'll speak more of this later. He lowered his voice. Tell no one, not even Helena. Of course. Livia helped adjust the drape of his toga. Be careful, father. Always. He touched his ring once more, a habitual gesture before entering the political arena. The weight of the Antonius legacy, both burden and shield. Senator Cassius examined the scroll before him with narrowed eyes. The lamplight in his private study cast long shadows across the marble floor as he read the damning evidence once more. This is confirmed? He asked the man standing before him. Drusus, captain of the Praetorian Guard, nodded. His scarred face betrayed no emotion. My sources are reliable. Senator Antonius has been gathering evidence against you and the others involved in the grain trade. Cassius rolled the scroll closed. How much does he know? Enough to cause problems. He has manifests showing the grain shipments arrived in Ostia but never reached the public granaries. Cassius cursed under his breath. Marcus Antonius had always been troublesome with his tedious notions of civic duty and virtue. We need to discredit him before he can present this evidence. Discredit may not be enough, Drusus suggested. A man of his standing has much to lose, Cassius interrupted. His reputation, his property, his position, his daughter. Drusus raised an eyebrow. The daughter? A slow smile spread across Cassius's face. Livia Antonius. Unmarried, educated beyond what's proper for a woman, and rumored to be involved in her father's affairs. He tapped the scroll thoughtfully. What if evidence were found that she's been corresponding with enemies of Rome? Antonius's political enemies, perhaps. Understanding dawned on Drusus's face. A treasonous daughter would devastate his credibility. Precisely. And if he attempts to defend her, he implicates himself. Cassius reached for blank parchment. We'll need convincing forgeries. Letters in her hand, discussing sensitive matters with known dissidents. I can provide authentic seals, Drusus offered. And I know a scribe who can mimic handwriting for the right price. Good. See to it immediately. Cassius began drafting the false evidence. The letters should suggest she's been passing her father's sensitive information to Sertorius's rebels in Hispania. A serious charge. Serious enough to warrant punishment, but not so serious that immediate execution would be demanded, Cassius explained. I want her sentenced to slavery, not death. Drusus looked confused. Slavery? Why not simply eliminate both of them? Because, my pragmatic friend, a quick death creates martyrs. But watching his beloved daughter stripped of citizenship and sold at auction like livestock? That will destroy Marcus Antonius more thoroughly than any blade. Cassius smiled coldly. And should he persist in his investigations afterward, then more permanent measures can be arranged. As you wish, Drusus conceded. When should we move against them? During the Feast of Jupiter. Antonius is hosting a gathering for his political allies. A public arrest will maximize the humiliation. Drusus nodded and departed to make arrangements, leaving Cassius to his plotting. Across the city, in the modest apartment he'd rented with his newfound freedom, Maximus sat on the edge of his bed staring at the wooden rudis that had granted him liberty. 3 months of freedom had proven more challenging than he'd anticipated. The nightmares hadn't stopped, blood-soaked visions of the arena haunting his sleep. During the day, he found himself at loose ends, a warrior with no battles to fight. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Maximus answered cautiously, hand reaching instinctively for a weapon that wasn't there. Atticus stood in the doorway, looking uneasy. May I enter? Maximus stepped aside. Of course. What brings you here? Atticus glanced around the sparsely furnished room. You're not drinking yourself to death. That's something. I considered it, Maximus admitted. What's wrong? You look troubled. Atticus sighed heavily. I've heard rumors. Bad ones. You remember my connection to Senator Varro's household. Your brother serves as his steward. There's talk among the senators. A plot against Marcus Antonius and his daughter. Maximus frowned. Political rivals? Cassius and his faction. They're creating false evidence of treason against the daughter. Atticus met his gaze. They plan to have her condemned to slavery. Why tell me this? I'm no politician. Because I know you, Wolf. Since your freedom, you've been searching for purpose. Atticus gestured around the room. This isn't living. It's just waiting. And you think getting involved in senatorial politics is the answer? Maximus asked incredulously. I think stopping an innocent woman from being enslaved might help you sleep at night. Atticus's words hit their mark. The arrest will happen soon, during the Feast of Jupiter. After that, she'll be sold quickly, before any allies can intervene. Maximus turned away, his jaw tight. What could I possibly do? You have your freedom and the money from your victories. Enough to purchase a slave. Atticus moved toward the door. Just something to consider, Wolf. Sometimes the purpose we seek finds us in unexpected ways. After Atticus left, Maximus picked up the rudis again, turning it in his hands. Freedom. Such a simple word for such a complicated reality. The Feast of Jupiter brought Rome's elite to Senator Antonius's villa. Lanterns illuminated the gardens, casting a warm glow over guests in their finest garments. Slaves circulated with wine and delicacies while musicians played softly in the background. Livia moved among the guests in a deep blue stola that complemented her dark hair. She nodded respectfully to her father's allies and endured polite conversation with their wives, all while observing the political currents flowing through the gathering. Your father throws a splendid feast, said Helena, appearing at her side. The daughter of Senator Flavius, Helena had been Livia's friend since childhood, though they had grown increasingly different as adults. Though I notice Senator Cassius isn't present. Father didn't invite him, Livia replied quietly. Their disagreements in the Senate have become rather pointed. Helena raised an eyebrow. Politics again, Livia? You should be discussing potential husbands, not senatorial disputes. Livia forced a smile. Perhaps both topics are equally tedious. Helena laughed, though her eyes remained calculating. You haven't changed since we were girls. Always preferring scrolls to jewelry. She glanced toward the entrance. I should find my father. He was speaking with someone from the Praetorian Guard earlier. As Helena departed, Livia felt a flicker of unease. The Praetorian Guard rarely attended social functions unless on official business. She sought out her father, finding him deep in conversation with Senator Varro. Father, she interrupted gently, I believe we have unexpected guests arriving. Marcus turned, his expression shifting as he saw the contingent of Praetorian Guards entering the atrium. Their armor gleamed in the lamplight, an intrusion of war into the peaceful evening. Stay behind me, he murmured to Livia before stepping forward to address the guards. Gentlemen, this is an unusual hour for official business. The captain of the guard, a hard-faced man Livia recognized as Drusus, produced an official scroll bearing the seal of the magistrate. Marcus Antonius, we come on the authority of the Senate and people of Rome. His voice carried across the suddenly silent gathering. We are here to arrest Livia Antonius on charges of treason against the Republic. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Marcus's face paled, but his voice remained steady. This is absurd. My daughter is no traitor. Evidence suggests otherwise, Drusus replied, unrolling the warrant. Letters in her hand have been discovered, revealing correspondence with Sertorius's rebels in Hispania. Impossible, Marcus declared. I demand to see this evidence. Drusus gestured, and another guard stepped forward with a leather case. From it, he withdrew several parchments that Livia immediately recognized as forgeries, though skillfully done. These are not mine, she said firmly. finding her voice despite the fear tightening her throat. The handwriting has been verified by 3 scribes, Drusus countered, as has the seal of your father's house, which you apparently used without his knowledge. Marcus examined the letters, his hands trembling slightly. These are forgeries. My daughter would never. The evidence speaks for itself, Senator, Drusus interrupted. Livia Antonius, you are hereby charged with treason against Rome. You will be brought before the magistrate tomorrow for sentencing. 2 guards moved toward Livia. Marcus stepped between them. This is Cassius's doing, he said, his voice rising. A transparent attempt to silence me because I've discovered his corruption. Be careful, Senator, Drusus warned. Such accusations against a respected member of the Senate could be construed as seditious. I have evidence. Father, don't, Livia interrupted, seeing the trap. If her father revealed his investigation now, he would be arrested alongside her. Rome needed him free to fight this injustice. The guards seized her arms. The guests watched in shocked silence, none daring to intervene against the Praetorian Guard. I'll resolve this, Livia, Marcus promised, his face ashen. This will not stand. As the guards led her away, Livia glimpsed Helena watching from beside her father, her expression unreadable. Something in her former friend's eyes sent a chill through Livia's heart, not surprise or horror, but satisfaction. Outside, as they placed her in a prison cart, Livia saw her father arguing vehemently with several senators. Suddenly, he clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. He collapsed to his knees as those around him called for a physician. Father! Livia cried, struggling against her captors. Be still, Drusus ordered. Your father's health is no longer your concern. The cart began to move. The last sight of her home was her father lying on the ground, surrounded by the very guests who had been raising toasts to him moments before. In the shadows across from the senator's villa, Maximus watched the arrest, his face grim. Atticus's information had proven correct. He fingered the purse of coins at his belt, his life's earnings from the arena. By tomorrow he would need to make his choice. The slave market bustled under the morning sun. Merchants barked their wares, human flesh categorized by strength, skills, and beauty. Buyers moved from platform to platform, examining teeth, muscles, and eyes with the detachment of cattle traders. Maximus pushed through the crowd, stomach tight with disgust. He'd seen Rome's markets before, but never with such clarity. Freedom had granted him that, at least, the ability to see the brutal commerce for what it was. Looking for household help or field labor? Asked a corpulent merchant, eyeing Maximus's simple but clean tunic and the coin purse at his belt. Neither, Maximus replied curtly, moving on. He found her at the far end of the market. Livia Antonius stood on a wooden platform, hands bound before her, wearing a rough brown tunic that replaced her fine stola. A wooden placard hung around her neck. Literate speaks Greek female scribe. Despite her circumstances, she held herself with dignity, chin raised, though her eyes revealed the shock of her precipitous fall. Around her neck, a newly forged iron slave collar gleamed in the sunlight, a stark contrast to her pale skin. The auctioneer, a balding man with wine-stained teeth, gestured to her. A rare offering today, citizens. A literate female, trained in Greek and Latin letters. Suitable for a merchant requiring correspondence or a wealthy household needing a tutor for their daughters. He deliberately avoided mentioning her patrician origins, though many in the crowd recognized the senator's daughter. Some watched with sympathy, others with the morbid fascination reserved for the spectacularly fallen. Let's start the bidding at 500 denarii, the auctioneer called. A high price for any slave, acknowledging her unusual skills. Several hands raised. Maximus studied the bidders, 2 wealthy merchants, a brothel keeper looking to add exotic variety to his establishment, and a thin man representing some unseen master. The brothel keeper raised the bid to 600. Livia's face remained impassive, but her hands trembled slightly. 700, called Maximus, his voice carrying across the platform. Heads turned. The auctioneer's eyes lit with avarice at the new bidder. 700 from the gentleman in the blue tunic. Do I hear 8? The bidding continued, narrowing eventually to Maximus and the thin representative who kept glancing at a sealed tablet, presumably containing his master's maximum offer. 1,200 denarii, the thin man called, consulting his tablet once more. A murmur ran through the crowd. An extraordinary sum for any slave, especially one whose status made her a potential liability. Maximus hesitated. Nearly his entire savings from 7 years in the arena would be required to exceed that bid. The thin man smiled, sensing victory. 1,200 going once. Livia's eyes met Maximus's briefly. Not pleading but resigned. She expected no rescue. 1,300, Maximus said, his decision made. The thin man consulted his tablet again, then shook his head slightly. 1,300 going once, twice, sold to the gentleman in blue. The auctioneer struck his staff on the platform. See the clerk for payment and processing. Moments later, a scribe handed Maximus a wax tablet, the bill of sale transferring ownership of the human being called Livia. No longer Antonius. No longer a citizen. Simply property. The slave handler removed her from the platform and delivered her to Maximus, passing him a small iron key for her collar. She's been processed already, the handler said. Officially registered with the censors. She's all yours. He leered slightly. Senator's daughter. Quite a purchase. Maximus's hand twitched with the desire to strike the man, but he restrained himself. Come, he said to Livia, turning away. She followed silently as he led her through Rome's crowded streets. Neither spoke until they reached a quieter side street. Why? She finally asked, her voice hoarse from silence. Maximus glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. Your father was investigating corruption in the grain trade. Surprise flickered across her face. How would you know that? I have connections. Former gladiators find work in noble houses as guards. We hear things. He guided her toward the Tiber. I know the charges against you are false. That doesn't explain why you would spend a fortune to buy me. Maximus stopped walking. Because I know what it's like to be stripped of freedom, to be owned. No one deserves that fate, especially not for speaking truth. Livia studied him, really seeing him for the first time. You're the gladiator. The one they call the Wolf of Thrace. He nodded once. You were freed months ago. I remember my father mentioning it. Her eyes narrowed. You've just surrendered your freedom again, haven't you? By associating with me, you've made yourself a target. Perhaps. Maximus resumed walking. Come. We need to leave this area. The man bidding against me worked for Drusus, the Praetorian captain. They'll be looking for you. My father had a heart seizure after your arrest. He's alive but unwell, being treated at his villa. Maximus's voice softened slightly. I have a physician friend who can tell us more, but first, we need somewhere safe. Quintus's home sat on the outskirts of Rome, where the city began to give way to countryside. The small villa had once belonged to a minor patrician who'd fallen on hard times. Now it served as both residence and clinic for the physician who had tended gladiators for over 20 years. You're certain we weren't followed? Quintus asked, peering through the window shutters at the darkening road. The older man's face was deeply lined, his hands steady despite his age. Yes, Maximus confirmed. We took a circuitous route. Quintus nodded and turned his attention to Livia, who sat silently on a wooden bench, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. So this is Senator Antonius's daughter. A dangerous guest to harbor. I'm aware of the risk I've brought to your door, Maximus said. We won't stay long. Nonsense. Where else would you go? Quintus gestured to a slave girl hovering nearby. Prepare food and fresh water for washing. And bring my medical kit. When the girl had gone, Quintus knelt before Livia. May I examine you, my lady? The processing at the slave markets can be rough. Livia nodded, her composure finally cracking. My father. Do you have news? He's alive, Quintus confirmed. Confined to his bed. The heart seizure was severe, but he's strong for his age. He examined her wrists where the ropes had chafed the skin. Senator Varro has taken charge of his care. A good man, loyal to your father. And loyal to Rome, Maximus added. He won't be easily intimidated by Cassius or his faction. The slave girl returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, and Quintus's worn leather medical bag. The physician worked methodically, cleaning Livia's abrasions and applying a salve. The collar should be removed, he said, frowning at the iron band around her neck. Maximus produced the small key. I wasn't sure if it would be safer to leave it in case we're stopped. This is my home, and here she is not a slave, Quintus said firmly. Maximus unlocked the collar, revealing red, irritated skin beneath. Livia's hand went to her throat, fingers tracing the tender flesh. Thank you, she whispered. Quintus applied more salve to her neck. You should rest. There's a small room prepared for you. I have questions, she insisted, though her voice betrayed her fatigue. Tomorrow, Quintus said gently. You've endured much today. When the slave girl had led Livia away, Quintus turned to Maximus. Now, tell me everything. Maximus explained what he knew of the conspiracy against Senator Antonius and his daughter. Quintus listened without interruption, his expression growing grimmer. Cassius has been consolidating power, the physician said when Maximus had finished. With Sulla's health failing, ambitious men are positioning themselves for what comes after. This seems an elaborate plot just to silence one senator. Marcus Antonius is more than just one voice. He represents the moderate faction, those who want reform without another civil war. Quintus poured wine for them both. His evidence about the grain corruption would have damaged Cassius irreparably. Then why not simply have him killed? Why target his daughter? Because Antonius has powerful allies. His death would raise too many questions. But discrediting him through his daughter? Quintus shook his head. Masterful if despicable. Few would stand with a man whose household harbored treason. They sat in silence for a moment, considering the implications. What's your plan? Quintus finally asked. I don't have one yet, Maximus admitted. I acted on instinct at the market. A former gladiator and a disgraced patrician woman against a praetorian captain and a powerful senator? Quintus raised an eyebrow. You'll need more than instinct. Before Maximus could respond, a pounding came at the door. Both men tensed. Stay here, Quintus ordered, moving to answer. From the shadows of the atrium, Maximus watched as Quintus opened the door to reveal a group of 4 men, their faces obscured by hooded cloaks. We're looking for a runaway slave, one said, his hand resting conspicuously on his sword hilt. A woman purchased at today's market. I've treated no slaves today except my own, Quintus replied calmly. You wouldn't mind if we searched the premises then? The man moved to step inside. Quintus held his ground. I mind very much. I have patients resting who shouldn't be disturbed. Unless you have a warrant from the praetor. The man hesitated, then gestured to his companions. We'll return if necessary, physician. Keep that in mind. After they departed, Quintus secured the door and returned to Maximus, his face grave. Drusus's men. They're searching methodically. It won't be long before they come back with official authority. Then we need to leave before dawn, Maximus decided. And go where? The Subura, Maximus said, naming Rome's notorious slum district. It's the last place they'd expect to find a senator's daughter. It's also dangerous, especially for a woman of her standing. Not as dangerous as staying within Drusus's reach. Maximus's hand went instinctively to his side, missing the familiar weight of his gladius. I need weapons. Quintus studied him for a moment, then nodded. I have some items from my arena days. Not gladiatorial weapons, but functional. His expression darkened. Maximus, you should know, the men who were just here, they weren't just looking for her. What do you mean? The description they gave included you. A tall man with a gladiator's bearing. They know who you are. Dawn found them moving through Rome's awakening streets. Livia wore a plain brown tunic with a homespun cloak, her hair concealed beneath a cloth wrap, the disguise of a servant rather than a slave. The iron collar remained in Quintus's possession. Maximus walked beside her, a small pack containing provisions slung over his shoulder. Beneath his cloak, a simple gladius hung at his waist, alongside a dagger. "Keep your eyes downcast," he instructed as they passed a patrol of urban watchmen. "Servants are invisible in Rome if they behave as expected." Livia obeyed, though he could sense her frustration at the posture of subservience. They turned into narrower streets where the buildings grew more dilapidated, the sewage channels overflowing with filth. The Subura, Rome's oldest and most notorious district. "You lived here?" Livia asked quietly, stepping around a sleeping drunk. "No. Gladiators were kept in the rudis, near the training grounds." Maximus guided her around a corner. "But I know people here. Former arena fighters, some who earned their freedom, others who escaped. Fugitives. Like us now," he reminded her. They reached a tenement building distinguished from its neighbors only by the carved wolf's head above the door. Maximus knocked in a distinctive pattern. After a moment, the door opened to reveal a heavy-set woman with graying hair and suspicious eyes. "What business?" she demanded. "I seek Livia," Maximus replied. "Tell her the wolf of Thrace needs shelter." The woman's eyes widened slightly in recognition before she gestured them inside. The building's interior was dark but surprisingly clean, the central courtyard well-maintained despite the poverty of the surroundings. "Wait here," the woman instructed before disappearing up a narrow staircase. Minutes later, a tall woman descended. Livia had the bearing of someone accustomed to command, despite the simple tunic she wore. A thin scar ran from her left temple to jaw, but it did nothing to diminish her striking appearance. "Maximus," she greeted him, her voice carrying the accent of Gaul. "I heard you'd earned your freedom. Yet here you are in the Subura with—" Her gaze shifted to Livia, assessing. "Someone who needs protection," Maximus replied. "We require lodging, somewhere discreet." Livia circled Livia slowly. "A patrician girl, by her bearing. In trouble with the law?" Falsely accused, Livia spoke for herself, meeting Livia's gaze directly. A smile tugged at Livia's lips. "Spirit. You'll need that here." She turned back to Maximus. "Upper floor, rear chamber. It has access to the roof if quick departure becomes necessary. 10 denarii per week." "Agreed." Maximus counted out the coins. Their room was small but clean, with a narrow pallet, a table, and a wooden chest. A single window overlooked the tangle of alleys behind the building. "It's not what you're accustomed to," Maximus said as Livia examined the sparse accommodations. "Neither is being a fugitive," she replied pragmatically. She sat on the edge of the pallet, suddenly looking very young and tired. "What now?" "We gather information. Find the evidence your father collected." Maximus placed a wooden practice dagger on the table between them. "And you learn to defend yourself." Livia eyed the training weapon with surprise. "You expect me to fight?" "I expect you to survive," he corrected. "If we're separated or if I fall, you need basic skills." She took the dagger, testing its weight. The smooth wooden blade was shaped like a Roman pugio, weighted to mimic the real weapon. "Stand up," Maximus instructed. When she complied, he moved behind her. "Hold it like this, grip firm but not rigid." His hand covered hers, adjusting her fingers. "A dagger isn't about strength but precision. You aim for vulnerable points, throat, eyes, groin." He guided her through basic strikes and defensive positions. Despite her exhaustion, Livia proved a quick study, her movements becoming more fluid with each repetition. "You're a natural," he observed after an hour of practice. "My father had me trained in Greek wrestling as a child," she explained, wiping sweat from her brow. "He believed in a sound mind and body, even for his daughter. It scandalized my mother's family." "Your father sounds unusual." "He is." Her voice hardened with determination. "And I will clear his name and mine." A knock interrupted them. Livia entered without waiting for response, her expression grim. "Praetorian guards are conducting searches in the district," she reported, moving block by block. "Someone informed them you might be here." "How long?" Maximus asked, reaching for his real weapons. Hours, perhaps less. They're thorough. Naivia placed a bundle on the table. Woman's clothing, more suitable for the district. And this. She produced a small knife in a leather sheath. For the lady. Steel, not wood. Thank you, Livia said, taking the weapon. Don't thank me yet, Naivia replied. There's more. Word from the forum. Senator Antonius died this morning. His heart gave out during the night. Livia staggered as if physically struck. Maximus caught her arm, steadying her. I'm sorry, Naivia said, genuine sympathy in her voice. I thought you should hear it from a friend rather than discover it in the streets. She withdrew, closing the door quietly behind her. In the silence that followed, Livia's face transformed. Grief gave way to something harder, a cold rage that reminded Maximus of seasoned warriors before battle. Teach me everything, she said, gripping the real dagger. Every dirty trick, every killing stroke. They've taken everything from me. I have nothing left to lose. Looking into her eyes, Maximus recognized something familiar, the dangerous clarity that came with absolute purpose. He'd seen it in the arena, in men who had transcended fear. We'll start again tomorrow, he said quietly. For now, you need to grieve. Tomorrow may be too late. She raised the dagger. Show me how to kill. A week passed in the Subura. While Rome mourned Senator Antonius with public ceremonies, his daughter trained in the shadows. Maximus proved a demanding teacher, drilling Livia until basic defensive moves became instinct. They practiced with wooden weapons at first, then switched to blunted steel as her confidence grew. Better, Maximus commented as she successfully deflected his attack and countered with a strike that stopped just short of his ribs. But in a real fight you'd still be dead. Why? Livia asked, breathing hard. You hesitated. He demonstrated the correct movement. Never pause. Your first strike must disable. Your second must kill. There are no third chances in combat. She nodded grimly. The naive patrician girl was falling away, replaced by someone harder, more focused. Grief had tempered her like steel. Meanwhile, through Naivia's network of informants, they gathered intelligence. Senator Varro had taken custody of Antonius's political documents but was being closely watched. Cassius had consolidated his position, presenting himself publicly as a grieving colleague while privately dividing Antonius's political allies among his supporters. We need those documents, Livia insisted during their evening meal of bread and lentil stew. Father's evidence against Cassius must be preserved. Varro's house will be guarded, Maximus cautioned, and we don't know if he can be trusted. He was father's oldest friend. If anyone preserved the evidence, it would be him. She leaned forward. We need to contact him discreetly. Impossible without exposing ourselves. Not necessarily. Livia's expression turned thoughtful. There's a gathering at the merchant Balbus's villa tomorrow night. Senators, equites, wealthy plebeians, all of Rome's influential citizens will attend, including Varro and Cassius. How does this help us? Every wealthy household brings slaves to such events. Servants who blend into the background, invisible to the patricians. Her eyes met his. We could enter as part of a household staff. No one looks closely at slaves serving wine. Maximus considered the plan. Risky. If you're recognized. I won't be. She touched her hair, now dyed darker with walnut stain. Besides, these people see what they expect to see. No one expects to find a senator's daughter among the servants. And me? Gladiators are hardly inconspicuous. Former arena fighters often serve as bodyguards for wealthy merchants. With the right clothing, you could pass as a freeman in a merchant's retinue. Maximus frowned. You've given this considerable thought. I have little else to do between training sessions, she replied with a thin smile. The following evening found them approaching Balbus's estate on the Celian Hill. Through Naivia's connections, they had secured positions with the household of a minor spice merchant. Livia wore the simple tunic of a personal slave, her darkened hair arranged in a servant's practical style. Maximus had donned a mercenary's leather armor, his gladius openly displayed as befitted a bodyguard. Remember, he murmured as they passed through the servants' entrance. "Keep your eyes down, speak only when addressed directly. If anyone questions you, I belong to Merchant Silvius, attending his wife. You're contracted for the evening's security." She gave him a reassuring nod. "I know my role." Inside, the villa blazed with light from hundreds of oil lamps. Wealthy Romans in their finest garments reclined on couches while slaves circulated with wine and delicacies. Musicians played in one corner, nearly drowned out by the hum of conversation. They separated, Maximus positioning himself along the wall with other guards while Livia joined the serving slaves. From his vantage point, Maximus observed the guests. Senator Varro reclined on a couch near the center of the room, deep in conversation with a younger patrician. Across the chamber, Cassius held court among his supporters, his laughter carrying over the crowd. For an hour, they maintained their disguises. Livia moved gracefully among the guests, filling wine cups with downcast eyes. Twice she passed near Varro, but the senator was never alone. Then Maximus noticed Helena, Livia's former friend, entering the banquet hall. She wore an elaborate green stola, her hair adorned with gold ornaments that marked her new status. On her arm was Drusus, the Praetorian captain, now dressed in civilian attire rather than military uniform. Maximus tensed as Helena's gaze swept the room. If anyone could recognize Livia despite her disguise, it would be a childhood friend. He shifted position, moving to intercept Livia as she circulated with a wine pitcher. "Helena is here," he warned under his breath as he pretended to adjust his sword belt. "With Drusus." Livia's expression remained neutral, but he saw her knuckles whiten around the pitcher's handle. "I need more time. I haven't reached Varro yet. It's too dangerous. We should withdraw." Her eyes flashed with determination. "I didn't come this far to leave empty-handed." Before he could stop her, she moved purposefully toward Senator Varro's couch, timing her approach as the senator's young companion excused himself. Maximus could only watch as she bent to refill Varro's cup, using the moment to whisper something in the older man's ear. Varro's face revealed nothing, but as Livia straightened, he casually dropped his signet ring into the folds of his toga. When she leaned to pour more wine, her hand briefly disappeared into those same folds. Across the room, Helena's head turned sharply, her attention caught by something familiar in Livia's movement. Her eyes narrowed. Helena whispered to Drusus, her eyes never leaving the slave girl with the wine pitcher. The Praetorian captain's hand moved casually to his concealed dagger as they began making their way across the crowded room. Maximus intercepted Livia as she retreated from Varro's couch. "We need to leave. Now." "I have it," she murmured, her hand closing around something small in her pocket. Varro preserved father's map of the grain warehouses. "Helena has recognized you. Drusus is coming this way." Livia glanced over her shoulder, saw the approaching danger, and nodded. "The kitchens. There's a service exit." They moved casually at first, then with increasing urgency as they heard Drusus's voice commanding people to make way. Reaching the kitchen, they pushed past startled slaves and cooks, ignoring protests as they headed for the rear door. "Stop them!" Drusus's command rang out behind them. Outside in the servants' courtyard, Maximus grabbed Livia's hand. "Run!" They fled into the warren of streets that wound down the Celian hill. Behind them, whistles shrilled as Drusus mobilized the villa's guards. Maximus led them through narrow alleys and service passages, drawing on his knowledge of Rome's hidden pathways. "This way," he urged, pulling her into a narrow gap between buildings as a patrol rushed past their position. "We're still too close," Livia gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "They'll seal off the entire district." Maximus surveyed their surroundings, then pointed to a temple complex ahead. "The sanctuary of Vesta. If we can reach it, they won't violate sacred ground," Livia finished, understanding immediately. They sprinted across an open square, keeping to the shadows. The temple's columned portico loomed ahead, promising safety. Then a shout went up. 4 of Drusus's men appeared, blocking their path. "Take this." Maximus pressed the signet ring into Livia's hand. "Get to the temple. I'll hold them off." "No. Go." He pushed her toward the sanctuary, then turned to face their pursuers, drawing his gladius. The guards slowed, recognizing the stance of a trained fighter. One stepped forward, sword raised. "Surrender the girl, and you might live." Maximus's only response was to attack. He moved with the deadly efficiency that had made him a champion, his blade finding the gap in the first guard's armor before the man could properly defend himself. The guard fell with a strangled cry. The other three attacked simultaneously. Maximus parried the first blade, ducked under a second, and delivered a crippling blow to the third man's knee. Steel rang against steel as he fought with cold precision, each movement calculated to maximum effect. One guard fell, then another. The last, realizing he was outmatched, turned to flee. Maximus's thrown dagger caught him between the shoulder blades. The brief combat left 4 men down in the quiet square. Maximus retrieved his dagger, wiping the blade clean on the fallen guard's tunic. He looked toward the temple, expecting to see Livia safe within its boundaries. Instead, he saw her struggling in Drusus's grip, a knife at her throat. "Impressive skills, Gladiator," the Praetorian captain called. "But ultimately futile." Maximus froze, calculating the distance between them. Too far to rush him before the knife could do its work. "Drop your weapons," Drusus commanded, "or I open her throat here and now." Maximus hesitated, then let his gladius and dagger fall to the paving stones. "Wise choice." Drusus smiled coldly. "Now kneel, hands behind your head." As Maximus complied, 2 more guards appeared, moving to secure him. Drusus kept his blade against Livia's throat, but his attention shifted to the fallen men around them. "For of my best men," he observed. "The wolf of Thrace indeed. You'll answer for this in the arena again before you die." "You'll answer to Vesta for bloodshed on her sacred ground," Livia hissed, momentarily finding her voice despite the blade at her throat. Drusus laughed. "We're not on sacred ground yet, girl. And you won't live to reach it." The guards reached Maximus, one driving a brutal kick into his ribs while the other prepared to bind his wrists. The momentary distraction was all Livia needed. With movements born of Maximus's relentless training, she drove her elbow sharply into Drusus's solar plexus. As he gasped involuntarily, his blade wavered. She twisted in his grip, the small knife from her pocket finding its mark in his thigh. Drusus roared in pain, his grip loosening enough for her to break free. She staggered toward the temple steps, blood streaming from a shallow cut on her neck where his blade had scored her skin. Maximus seized the opportunity, surging upward to headbutt the guard before him. Grabbing the stunned man's sword, he dispatched both guards with efficient brutality, then snatched up his own weapons. Drusus had pulled the knife from his leg and limped after Livia, hatred distorting his features. Before he could reach her, Maximus intercepted him, their blades meeting with a clash that echoed across the square. "Get to the temple!" Maximus shouted to Livia without taking his eyes off Drusus. The Praetorian captain was no arena fighter, but he was skilled and dangerous. They exchanged blows, steel ringing against steel as they tested each other's defenses. "You die tonight, Gladiator," Drusus snarled. "Many have made that promise," Maximus replied calmly. "None have kept it." From the corner of his eye, he saw Livia reach the temple steps, then hesitate, watching their combat. "Go," he commanded again. Instead, she darted back toward them, snatching up a fallen guard's. Before either man could react, she was at Maximus's side, her blade joining his against Drusus. "Together," she said, meeting Maximus's surprised glance with determined eyes. Drusus's eyes widened at the unexpected development. The senator's daughter, fighting alongside a gladiator with a stolen sword. "You've learned new tricks," he sneered at Livia, adjusting his stance to face both opponents. "More than you know," she replied, her blade steady despite her lack of experience. Maximus recognized her limitations immediately. Her training had focused on knife work, not swordplay. Yet her presence divided Drusus's attention, creating opportunities. "Stay at my flank," Maximus murmured. "Force him to watch us both." They engaged Drusus together, their blades a coordinated assault that kept the Praetorian captain constantly on the defensive. When he focused on parrying Maximus's expert strikes, Livia would dart in, forcing him to shift his guard. When he turned to address her attacks, Maximus would press forward. Slowly, they drove him back toward the temple steps. Drusus fought with increasing desperation, his wounded leg hampering his mobility. In the distance, whistles signaled approaching reinforcements. "We need to end this," Maximus said, recognizing the dwindling time. Livia nodded, understanding his intent without explanation. When Maximus launched a ferocious series of strikes that momentarily fixed Drusus's complete attention, she circled to the captain's injured side. Her blade slashed across the back of his knee, severing tendons. Drusus collapsed with a howl of pain. Maximus kicked away his sword and pressed his gladius to the man's throat. "Finish it," Drusus spat. "You're dead either way." "No," Livia intervened, her voice cold. "Death is too quick. Let him live with the shame of defeat." She turned to Maximus. "The temple. Now." They retreated to the sanctuary steps as the first of Drusus's reinforcements appeared at the square's edge. The wounded captain bellowed orders from where he lay, but his men hesitated at the threshold of sacred ground. To violate a temple sanctuary meant death by divine judgment, a risk few Romans would take. Inside the temple precinct, a Vestal virgin emerged from the inner sanctuary, her white robes glowing in the moonlight. "What disturbance is this?" she demanded, her authority absolute despite her youth. "We seek sanctuary," Livia replied, dropping to one knee in respect. "I am Livia, daughter of Senator Marcus Antonius, falsely accused of treason. This man protected me from those who would do me harm." The Vestal's eyes narrowed. The daughter of Antonius was condemned as a traitor and sold into slavery by false evidence created by Senator Cassius and Praetorian Captain Drusus. Livia held out the signet ring. "Senator Varro preserved some of my father's evidence against them." The Vestal examined the ring, then studied Livia's face. "You have your father's eyes," she said finally. "I remember you from the rites of Ceres. You attended with your mother before her passing." "You remember correctly," Livia confirmed, surprise evident in her voice. "I was a novice then." The Vestal glanced at the growing number of armed men gathering outside the sanctuary boundaries. "You may rest here tonight. Tomorrow at dawn, you must leave. The goddess protects those in genuine need, but her protection is not indefinite." "Thank you," Maximus said, sheathing his bloody sword. The Vestal led them to a small chamber used by temple servants. "Remain here. Do not enter the inner sanctuary under any circumstances." When she had gone, Livia sank onto a simple bench, the adrenaline of combat fading to leave her trembling. "I've never killed anyone before." "You still haven't," Maximus pointed out. "Drusus lives. Because of what you taught me." She touched the shallow cut on her neck, wincing. "I was able to fight back instead of being a helpless victim." Maximus found a clean cloth and a water basin. "Let me see that wound." As he gently cleaned the cut, Livia withdrew Varro's ring from her pocket. "We should examine what he gave us while we have light." The ring's seal was designed to open, revealing a hidden compartment beneath the carved emblem. Inside was a tightly folded piece of parchment, which Livia carefully extracted and unfolded. "It's a map," she said, studying the markings, "of Rome's grain warehouses, with numbers and annotations in my father's hand." "What does it show?" "Locations where grain shipments were diverted." Her finger traced a series of marks along the Tiber. "And this symbol here, it's a key to his private journal. The one he kept encoded." "Do you understand the code?" "Yes. He taught it to me years ago, in case anything happened to him." Her expression hardened. "The journal itself must still be in our villa." "Which is now controlled by Cassius's people," Maximus reminded her. "Not entirely. My father's personal quarters would have been sealed upon his death, awaiting proper inventory by the magistrates." Livia's eyes gleamed with renewed purpose. The journal would be hidden in his study, in a compartment beneath the floor mosaic. No one else knows of its existence. "You're suggesting we break into your former home?" "Yes. Tonight, while Drusus is incapacitated and before Cassius learns of our encounter." She studied his face. Unless you think it's too dangerous? Maximus considered the risks, then nodded slowly. The Praetorians will focus their search around this temple, expecting us to remain under protection until dawn. It creates an opportunity elsewhere. Then we move as soon as it's safe to leave the sanctuary. If we're caught, we won't be, Livia interrupted with newfound confidence. Together, we're stronger than they expect. She held his gaze. You've shown me that. In the flickering lamplight, Maximus saw the transformation in her. No longer just a senator's sheltered daughter, but a woman coming into her own power through adversity. Something shifted between them, an understanding that transcended their different worlds. They left the temple sanctuary an hour before dawn, slipping past the reduced guard Drusus had stationed outside. The Praetorian captain himself had been carried away for medical treatment, his career likely finished by the crippling wound to his leg. Moving through Rome's sleeping streets, they approached the Antonius villa from the service entrance that backed onto the gardens. Livia led the way, her knowledge of the household's routines guiding them past potential sentries. The night watchman always dozes after the third hour, she whispered as they scaled the garden wall. And the kitchen slaves won't rise for another hour to begin baking. The villa stood quiet and partially shuttered, a house in mourning. Livia paused in the garden, momentarily overcome by memories of her father strolling these same paths, discussing politics and philosophy with her. We can't linger, Maximus reminded her gently. She nodded, pushing aside grief to focus on their mission. They entered through the kitchen, finding it empty as predicted. Moving silently through familiar corridors, Livia guided them to her father's study. As expected, official seals marked the door as inventory pending. Maximus broke them carefully, hoping to replace them before their intrusion was discovered. Inside, the study remained exactly as Senator Antonius had left it, scrolls neatly arranged, writing implements on the desk, a half-filled cup of wine now evaporated to a stain. There, Livia pointed to a mosaic of Neptune in the center of the floor. Help me move the desk. Together they shifted the heavy wooden table, revealing the complete mosaic beneath. Livia knelt, pressing specific tesserae in sequence. A section of the mosaic clicked and loosened, revealing a cavity beneath the floor. Father never trusted banks or strongboxes, she explained, reaching into the hiding place. Too easily confiscated by political enemies. She withdrew a leather-bound journal and several scrolls. This is everything. His private records of the conspiracy, including names, dates, and locations. As she leafed through the journal, a sealed letter fell from between its pages. Her name was written on it in her father's hand. With trembling fingers, she broke the seal and read. He knew, she whispered. He suspected Cassius would move against him and prepared this evidence as protection. She looked up at Maximus, eyes bright with unshed tears. He instructs me to take this to Tribune Metellus if anything happens to him. Metellus serves in the popular assembly and opposed Sulla's reforms. A political ally? More than that. According to this, Metellus has been gathering his own evidence against Cassius and his faction. Together with father's documentation, it would be enough to bring formal charges before the Senate. Maximus helped gather the materials. Then we find Metellus at first light. A floorboard creaked in the corridor outside. Both froze, listening intently. Soft footsteps approached, then stopped at the study door. Someone's there, Maximus mouthed, drawing his gladius. The door opened slowly to reveal a familiar face. Helena, Livia's childhood friend, now dressed in a simple night tunic, her hair loose around her shoulders. I thought it might be you, she said quietly, stepping inside and closing the door. The household steward reported broken seals, but I convinced him to wait until morning to investigate. Helena. Livia's voice held equal measures of surprise and suspicion. Why are you here at this hour? I've been staying here since your father's death. Cassius appointed me to oversee the household inventory. Her eyes took in the open floor compartment and the documents in Livia's hands. You found what you came for, I see. Evidence of Cassius's corruption, Livia confirmed, watching her former friend carefully. And your involvement in framing me. Helena's expression remained unreadable. You always were clever, Livia. Too clever for a woman in Rome. She glanced at Maximus, then back to Livia. You need to leave immediately. Drusus sent messengers to all likely locations after your encounter at the temple. Guards will arrive within the hour. Why warn us? Maximus asked, suspicious. Because despite everything, I don't wish to see Livia executed. Helena's composure cracked slightly. It was never supposed to go this far. Your father was meant to be discredited, not dead. You were meant to be humbled, not destroyed. Yet you betrayed me all the same, Livia said, her voice hard. Why? Helena's laugh held no humor. Why does anyone betray in Rome? Ambition. Protection. Survival. She twisted a ring on her finger. A new ring, Livia noticed, bearing the emblem of Cassius's house. Cassius promised me marriage to his nephew. Elevation for my family. Security in uncertain times. At the cost of my freedom and my father's life. Politics has always required sacrifice. Helena stepped aside from the door. Go now while you can. The servants' passage behind the kitchens remains unguarded. Maximus moved to the door first, checking the corridor before signaling Livia to follow with the documents. As they passed Helena, Livia paused. I would never have betrayed you this way, she said softly. I know, Helena replied, not meeting her eyes. That's the difference between us. You inherited your father's principles. I inherited the pragmatism to survive in Rome. They had nearly reached the kitchens when horns sounded at the villa's main entrance, the signal of Praetorian guards arriving. Too late, Maximus muttered, pulling Livia toward the servants' exit. They burst into the pre-dawn darkness of the garden, only to find their escape route blocked by a contingent of guards. At their center stood Senator Cassius himself, smiling coldly. How predictable, he said. Helena performed her role perfectly, wouldn't you agree? Behind them, Helena emerged from the villa, now wearing a satisfied smile. They have the documents, my lord, just as you anticipated. Excellent work, my dear. Cassius stepped forward. I'll take those now, Livia. Your father's pathetic attempts at justice die with him. Surrounded in the garden, Maximus assessed their situation with a gladiator's calculating eye. 6 guards, plus Cassius and Helena. Poor odds, especially with Livia to protect and the vital documents to preserve. There's nowhere to run, Cassius said, gesturing for his men to close in. Surrender the documents, and perhaps I'll be merciful. Like you were merciful to my father? Livia clutched the journal to her chest. Your father's weak heart killed him, not I. Cassius's smile never reached his eyes. Though I admit, the stress of your disgrace likely hastened his end. Maximus shifted position, placing himself between Livia and the approaching guards. Run when you see an opening, he murmured to her. Head for the forum. Find Metellus. I won't leave you, she whispered back. One of us must survive to expose the truth. Before either could move, a commotion erupted at the villa's main entrance. Shouts and the clash of steel echoed through the morning air. Cassius turned, momentarily distracted by the unexpected interruption. What now? He demanded of no one in particular. The distraction provided the opening Maximus needed. He launched himself at the nearest guard, his gladius finding the gap between armor plates. As the man fell, Maximus seized his shield, using it to block a thrust from a second guard. Run, he shouted to Livia. Instead, she grabbed a garden rake, wielding it awkwardly but effectively enough to keep Helena at bay when the woman tried to intercept her. The fighting at the villa entrance grew louder, suggesting a substantial force had arrived. Maximus dispatched a second guard with brutal efficiency, his arena training evident in every movement. The remaining guards hesitated, unnerved by his lethal skill and the unknown threat approaching from the villa. Suddenly, the garden doors burst open. Atticus appeared, leading a group of hard-faced men, former gladiators by their bearing and scars. They fell upon Cassius's remaining guards with practiced violence. Wolves! Atticus called, tossing Maximus a second gladius. Time to leave. Cassius, seeing his advantage dissolve, attempted to retreat. Livia blocked his path, the rake still in her hands. "Not so fast, Senator," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "You wouldn't dare harm a Roman senator," Cassius sneered, reaching for the dagger at his belt. "Perhaps not," came a new voice from the villa doorway. "But I would." Senator Varro stepped into the garden, flanked by his own guards and the tribune Metellus, a stern-faced man whose military bearing suggested his days commanding legions weren't far behind him. "Varro," Cassius hissed, "you overstep your bounds." "I uphold my oath to Rome," Varro replied evenly, "as Marcus Antonius did before his death." Metellus stepped forward. "Senator Gaius Cassius, by the authority of the Popular Assembly, you are detained pending investigation of corruption and conspiracy against the Republic." "This is outrageous," Cassius sputtered. "You have no evidence." "But we do," Livia interjected, holding up her father's journal. "Every transaction, every manipulated grain shipment, every bribed official, all documented by my father before his death." Helena, seeing the tide turn, attempted to slip away. Atticus caught her arm. "Not so fast, my lady. You're as implicated as your patron." In the relative calm that followed, Maximus made his way to Livia's side. "Are you injured?" She shook her head, still processing the sudden reversal of their fortunes. "How did they find us?" "I suspected you might attempt to recover your father's records," Varro explained, approaching them. "When I gave you the map, I also sent word to Atticus to gather reinforcements and meet us here." "You know Atticus?" Maximus asked, surprised. "Your old trainer approached me shortly after Livia's arrest, suspecting foul play. We've been working together since then, gathering allies." Varro turned to Livia. "Your father would be proud of your courage, my dear." Metellus joined them, his attention on the journal Livia held. "Is that Marcus's evidence?" "Yes, Tribune." She handed it to him. "Everything needed to expose the conspiracy. And to clear your name," he added, examining the documents. "These will need to be presented to the Senate immediately before Cassius's allies can intervene." As Metellus's men secured Cassius and Helena, Atticus approached Maximus with a grim expression. "It's not over, Wolf. Drusus survived your encounter at the temple." "He's in no condition to threaten anyone," Maximus replied, recalling the crippling wound he'd inflicted. "Perhaps not physically, but he's already sent messengers to Sulla." Atticus's voice lowered. "He's calling for your return to the arena as punishment for attacking Praetorian guards." Varro overheard this exchange. "Is this true?" he asked Metellus. The tribune nodded reluctantly. "Drusus has invoked his authority as Praetorian captain. Even with Cassius's conspiracy exposed, the law regarding assault on imperial guards is absolute." "Then we must hurry," Varro decided. "The Senate convenes at midday. If we can present our evidence before Sulla's response to Drusus arrives." "We'll need to separate," Metellus suggested. "I'll take the evidence directly to the Senate with Varro. Livia should come with us to testify." "And Maximus?" Livia asked, concern evident in her voice. "Must remain hidden until his status is resolved," Atticus answered. "I know a safe place where Sulla's men won't find him." Livia turned to Maximus, her expression torn between duty to her father's legacy and concern for the man who had risked everything to protect her. "Go," he told her gently. "This was always about clearing your name and exposing the truth. Finish what your father started." "I'll come find you when it's done," she promised, her hand briefly touching his. As dawn broke fully over Rome, they separated, Livia departing with Varro and Metellus toward the Forum, while Maximus followed Atticus and his former gladiators into the labyrinthine streets of the Subura. Atticus led Maximus through a series of increasingly narrow passages in the Subura, eventually stopping at an unmarked door in a crumbling tenement. Inside, a surprisingly spacious room contained an assortment of weapons, armor, and medical supplies. "My personal armory," Atticus explained, securing the door behind them. "From my days managing gladiators for private patrons." "You never mentioned this place," Maximus observed, examining the well-maintained weapons. "A man in Rome survives by keeping secrets." Atticus poured wine into 2 cups. Besides, freedom doesn't mean the same thing for all of us. Some former gladiators find honest work. Others adapt differently. Maximus understood the implication. You train fighters for illegal contests. Among other services, Atticus admitted without apology. Rome's noble houses sometimes require discreet resolution to their problems. Assassinations. I prefer private security solutions. Atticus handed him a cup. It's kept me alive and independent in a city that offers few options to men like us. They drank in silence, each man contemplating the compromises freedom had required of them. What happens now? Maximus finally asked. We wait. My contacts in the forum will bring news of the Senate's deliberations. Atticus gestured to a pallet in the corner. Rest while you can. You've been fighting for days. Despite his vigilance, exhaustion overcame Maximus. He slept deeply, waking only when Atticus shook his shoulder hours later. News? Maximus asked immediately. Yes, but not what we hoped. Atticus's expression was grim. Metellus presented the evidence to the Senate. They've arrested several of Cassius's conspirators, and Livia's citizenship has been provisionally restored. That's good news. The complication is Sulla. The dictator made a rare appearance before the Senate, personally ruling on Drusus's complaint against you. Atticus paused. He's ordered your return to the arena for a special contest. One fight for your freedom. Maximus absorbed this with stoic resignation. Against whom? Sulla's champion, a Germanic tribesman called Alaric the Giant. Undefeated in 40 matches. I've heard of him. They say he's as big as 2 men. And twice as vicious, Atticus confirmed. It's meant to be execution disguised as entertainment. When? Tomorrow. The games of Mars begin at midday. Atticus studied his former pupil. You could flee Rome. Tonight. I have connections who could get you to Gaul. Maximus shook his head. Running would confirm my guilt and implicate Livia again. Besides, where would I go? Rome's reach is long, and I have no skills beyond fighting. Then we prepare. Atticus moved to a chest in the corner, withdrawing items wrapped in oiled cloth. I've brought something that might help. He unwrapped the bundle, revealing a familiar wolf-crested helmet and matched set of gladiatorial armor. Maximus's personal gear from his arena days. How did you get this? Maximus asked, running his fingers over the wolf emblem. I purchased it from the Ludus master after your freedom was granted. Thought it might be valuable someday. Atticus smiled wryly. Though I hoped it would be as a memento, not for practical use. Maximus lifted the helmet, feeling its familiar weight. Fitting that I should face death wearing the same armor that kept me alive for 7 years. Don't speak of death yet, Atticus chided. Alaric is formidable but not invincible. I've studied his fights. He relies on strength and intimidation, not technique. They spent the remaining daylight hours preparing, Atticus coaching as Maximus practiced with various weapons, reacquainting himself with movements that had once been second nature. Despite months of freedom, his body remembered the lethal rhythms of the arena. As evening fell, a quiet knock interrupted their preparations. Atticus opened the door cautiously, then stepped aside to admit Livia. She wore a plain stola, her hair covered by a modest veil, but the iron slave collar was gone from her neck. You shouldn't be here, Maximus said, though he couldn't deny the relief he felt seeing her unharmed. I had to come. She took in the sight of his arena armor with visible distress. Then it's true. Sulla has ordered you back to the arena. One fight, he confirmed. Tomorrow at midday. Against Alaric the Giant, she added, her voice tight. I was there when Sulla announced it. He made it a public spectacle, inviting all of Rome to witness justice for your crimes against his praetorians. The perfect punishment, Maximus observed without self-pity. Return the rebellious gladiator to the arena that made him. It's my fault, Livia said, her composure finally breaking. If you hadn't helped me. I made my choice, he interrupted firmly. And I would make it again. Atticus discreetly moved to the door. I should check with my contacts about tomorrow's arrangements. I'll return later. When he had gone, an awkward silence fell between them. Maximus continued preparing his armor, checking straps and fittings with methodical attention. The Senate has restored my citizenship, Livia finally said, and frozen my father's assets pending full investigation. That's good news. Temporary good news. Sulla himself is reviewing the case. She moved closer, watching his hands work. Cassius has powerful allies, even in custody. Aunt Helena's family is claiming she was manipulated, an innocent pawn. Politics, Maximus said with resignation. Yes. Livia touched the wolf crest on his helmet. There's something you should know. Tribune Metellus has offered me protection. His household, his name. Maximus's hands stilled. Marriage. A political alliance, she clarified. He was my father's ally and shares his vision for Rome. With his protection, I could continue father's work. He's a good man by reputation, Maximus acknowledged, ignoring the unexpected tightness in his chest. You should accept. Should I? Her eyes met his, searching for something neither of them had dared name. What future could there be for us, Livia? I'm a former gladiator facing execution in the arena. You're a patrician woman with restored status. I've seen enough of status to know its hollow worth, she replied fiercely. I've also seen what truly matters: courage, honor, loyalty. Her hand moved from the helmet to his scarred cheek. Survive tomorrow. That's all I ask. The Colosseum hummed with anticipation, its stone benches filled to capacity for the games of Mars. Rome's citizens had turned out en masse, drawn by the unusual spectacle of a freed gladiator forced to fight once more. The story had spread through every quarter of the city, the Wolf of Thrace, champion turned fugitive, facing Sulla's undefeated giant. Beneath the arena, in the dim confines of the gladiator holding cells, Maximus prepared with the focused calm that had kept him alive for 7 years. He strapped on his armor piece by piece, each buckle and tie a familiar ritual. The wolf-crested helmet sat before him, awaiting its moment. Quite the crowd, Atticus commented, returning from his reconnaissance. Sulla himself has come to watch, along with half the Senate. And Livia? Maximus asked, adjusting his arm guard. In Tribune Metellus's box, under his protection. Atticus handed him a small vial. Quintus sent this. A mixture of herbs to dull pain without clouding the mind. Maximus pocketed the vial without comment. Pain would be the least of his concerns against Alaric. I've been studying the arena layout, Atticus continued. They've prepared a simple configuration, open sand, no obstacles. They want an unobstructed spectacle. Favoring Alaric's size and reach, Maximus noted. What weapons? Standard gladius for you. Alaric wields a German longsword and round shield. Atticus's expression was grim. There's something else you should know. I overheard the arena master speaking with the Praetorian officers. This match has been designated sine mission. Maximus's hands stilled. No mercy. Someone wants to ensure you don't leave the arena alive, regardless of the outcome. Atticus clasped his shoulder. You've survived impossible odds before, Wolf. Not against Alaric the giant, Maximus replied pragmatically. But I'll make it costly for him. A horn sounded, signaling the approach of their match. Guards appeared to escort Maximus to the arena gates. He lifted his helmet, feeling its familiar weight as he placed it over his head. The wolf crest, once a symbol of pride, now felt like a memorial to a life twice lost. Fight smart, not proud, Atticus advised, walking alongside as far as permitted. Alaric tires in extended matches. He's never fought beyond the 10th minute. At the gates, they clasped arms in the gladiator tradition. Whatever happens, Maximus said, thank you for your friendship. It's worth more than freedom. Then the gates opened, and the Wolf of Thrace stepped once more onto the blood-soaked sand that had been his home for 7 years. The crowd roared at his appearance, their reaction a mixture of bloodlust and genuine appreciation for a returning champion. Maximus kept his eyes forward, ignoring the spectators as he always had. On the opposite side of the arena, another gate opened. Alaric the giant earned his name. standing nearly 7 feet tall with shoulders twice the width of an ordinary man. The Germanic warrior was an imposing figure in minimalist armor that displayed his muscled physique. His blonde hair and beard were worn in the tribal style of his people, and blue woad markings covered his exposed skin. They approached the center of the arena, stopping before the elevated box where Sulla himself presided. The aging dictator looked frail but maintained the cold authority that had made him master of Rome. Citizens of Rome, the announcer's voice boomed across the Colosseum. Today we witness justice in the traditional manner of our ancestors. Maximus of Thrace, former gladiator who raised his hand against the Praetorian Guard, will fight for his freedom against the undefeated champion, Alaric of the Suebi. The crowd cheered with anticipation. This contest is declared sine missione, to the death without mercy, the announcer continued. Let blood appease Mars on his festival day. Sulla made a small gesture, signaling the start of the combat. As the gladiators turned to face each other, Maximus scanned the crowd, finding Livia in Metellus's box. Even at a distance, he could see the tension in her posture as she leaned forward, hands gripping the stone balustrade. Across the sand, Alaric grinned through his thick beard. "Little wolf," he called in accented Latin, "I will wear your crest as a trophy." "Many have tried," Maximus replied evenly, settling into his fighting stance. They circled each other warily, each assessing his opponent. Alaric made the first move, a powerful overhead strike with his long sword that would have split Maximus in two had it connected. Maximus sidestepped, the blade whistling past him to strike sparks from the sand. The giant was fast despite his size, recovering quickly to block Maximus's counterattack with his shield. The impact reverberated up Maximus's arm, confirming Alaric's exceptional strength. For several minutes they exchanged strikes, neither gaining advantage. Maximus fought defensively, testing Alaric's patterns while conserving his energy. The crowd grew restless, hungry for blood rather than technique. Alaric sensed their mood and pressed harder, launching a series of powerful attacks that forced Maximus to give ground. One blow caught the edge of Maximus's shield, splitting the wood and sending him staggering backward. The crowd roared its approval. Discarding the damaged shield, Maximus switched to a two-handed grip on his gladius. He was more vulnerable now but also more agile. When Alaric charged again, Maximus ducked under the swing and scored the first blood, a shallow cut across the giant's thigh. Alaric bellowed in surprise more than pain, his expression changing from confidence to focused anger. "First blood to you, wolf," he acknowledged. "The last will be mine." The sun beat down mercilessly as the combat intensified. Sweat stung Maximus's eyes beneath his helmet, his breathing labored as he evaded another of Alaric's powerful swings. They had been fighting for nearly 15 minutes, well beyond what Atticus had said was the giant's usual endurance. Yet Alaric showed few signs of tiring. If anything, the first blood drawn against him had stoked a berserker fury. His attacks came relentlessly, each blow capable of ending the match instantly if it connected fully. Maximus relied on speed and experience, conserving movement while looking for openings. He had scored several more minor wounds on his opponent, but nothing substantial enough to slow the giant. Meanwhile, a lucky strike had caught Maximus's left arm, leaving a deep gash that leaked blood down to his fingers. In the imperial box, Sulla leaned forward with interest, his sunken eyes following every movement. Nearby, Drusus watched from a seated position, his crippled leg extended before him, his face a mask of vindictive anticipation. Alaric pressed forward again, his long sword whistling through the air. Maximus parried, the impact numbing his arms. Before he could recover, Alaric's shield slammed into him, sending him sprawling onto the sand. The crowd roared, sensing the end. The giant advanced for the killing blow. Maximus rolled desperately, feeling the sword strike sand where his head had been an instant before. He scrambled to his feet, backing away to gain precious seconds. "You fight well, wolf," Alaric called, his voice carrying across the arena. "But you grow tired. I smell your blood." Maximus didn't waste breath responding. Alaric was right. He couldn't maintain this pace much longer. He needed to end the fight soon or die trying. Studying his opponent through narrowed eyes, Maximus noted what he'd been looking for, a slight favoring of Alaric's right leg where the first cut had landed. The giant compensated well, but the pattern was there if you knew to watch for it. Maximus made his decision. When Alaric charged again, instead of retreating, he stepped into the attack. The unexpected move momentarily confused the giant, creating a split-second opening. Maximus's gladius sliced across Alaric's sword arm, cutting deep into muscle. The giant roared with pain but didn't drop his weapon. His counterswing caught Maximus's helmet, tearing it from his head and sending him staggering backward, momentarily dazed. Blood streaming down his face from a gash at his temple, Maximus fought to regain his focus. The crowd's noise seemed distant now, the world narrowed to the immediate threat before him. Alaric advanced more cautiously, his wounded arm clearly hampering his sword work. They clashed again at the center of the arena, blade meeting blade in a shower of sparks. Locked together, Alaric used his superior strength to force Maximus down to one knee. Slowly, inexorably, the giant's blade edged closer to Maximus's throat. "Die with honor, wolf," Alaric grunted, applying more pressure. In the spectator boxes, Livia gripped the stone balustrade so tightly her knuckles whitened. Beside her, Tribune Metellus watched with the calculated assessment of a military man. "He cannot win," Metellus said quietly. "The German is too strong." "You don't know Maximus," Livia replied, never taking her eyes from the arena. Below, in what appeared to be his final moments, Maximus reached into his belt pouch with his free hand. His fingers closed around Quintus's vial. In one fluid motion he smashed it against Alaric's leg, the glass shards and herbal mixture embedding in an existing wound. Alaric howled as the potent mixture burned into his flesh. His pressure faltered for just an instant, but it was enough. Maximus surged upward, driving his gladius into the underside of the giant's jaw, through the soft tissue, and into his brain. For a moment, they stood frozen in a macabre embrace. Then Alaric's massive body crumpled to the sand, taking Maximus down with him. Silence fell over the Colosseum as spectators held their breath, uncertain of the outcome. Both men lay motionless amid the blood-soaked sand. Then, with excruciating effort, Maximus pulled himself free and struggled to his feet. He stood swaying, covered in blood, both his own and his opponent's, facing Sulla's box with defiant exhaustion. The crowd erupted, their bloodlust satisfied by the spectacular combat. They chanted his arena name, "Wolf! Wolf! Wolf!" In the imperial box, Sulla studied the victorious gladiator with clinical detachment. Beside him, Drusus leaned forward, whispering urgently in the dictator's ear, likely reminding him of the Sine Mission decree. Sulla raised his hand, silencing the crowd. All eyes turned to him, awaiting his judgment. The tradition was clear, having designated the match, without mercy, the victor should execute his fallen opponent. But Alaric was already dead, robbing Sulla of this final satisfaction. The dictator's withered hand remained raised as he considered the bloodied gladiator below. Then, with deliberate slowness, he extended his thumb. A murmur ran through the crowd as they tried to interpret the gesture. Was it life or death? The thumb neither pointed up for life nor turned down for death, but remained extended horizontally, an ambiguous signal. Sulla's voice, thin but carrying, provided clarification. "The wolf of Thrace has satisfied Mars with blood. Let him return to his freedom, for now." The crowd roared its approval, but Maximus took no joy in their reaction. His eyes sought Livia in Metellus's box. Their gazes locked across the distance, a moment of connection amid the barbaric spectacle. Arena slaves approached to escort him from the sand. As they reached the exit gate, Maximus glanced back at Sulla. The dictator was already leaving, supported by attendants, but Drusus remained, his eyes burning with thwarted vengeance. The message was clear: he had survived today, but his enemies remained powerful. The battle in the arena might be over, but the larger conflict continued. Quintus worked methodically, cleaning and stitching Maximus's wounds in the quiet of Atticus's hideout. The physician's experienced hands moved with practiced efficiency, his silence more eloquent than words as he assessed the damage Alaric had inflicted. "You should be dead," he finally said, tying off a suture on Maximus's arm. "Many have expressed that sentiment today," Maximus replied dryly. "I'm serious." Quintus applied a herbal poultice to the wound. "That cut on your temple missed the artery by the width of a hair. And these defensive wounds on your arms, any deeper and you'd have lost the use of your hands." "Fortune favors the desperate," Atticus commented from where he sat cleaning Maximus's armor. "Or perhaps Mars himself decided it wasn't your day to die." Maximus winced as Quintus moved to a particularly deep gash across his ribs. "It wasn't divine intervention. Alaric was overconfident, and I exploited it." "Nevertheless, your victory has made quite an impression," Atticus said. "The entire city speaks of nothing else. The Wolf of Thrace returns from retirement to slay the undefeated giant. They're already composing songs about it in the taverns." "What good is that?" Maximus asked wearily. "Sulla's judgment was deliberately ambiguous. He granted me life while making it clear my status remains precarious." "Politics," Quintus spat. "He couldn't execute you after such a victory without risking the crowd's displeasure. But neither could he fully pardon you with Drusus demanding vengeance." A discreet knock interrupted their conversation. Atticus checked through a small viewing port before opening the door to admit Tribune Metellus. The military man entered alone, his bearing formal as he surveyed the small gathering. "Tribune," Maximus acknowledged, attempting to rise despite his injuries. "Remain seated," Metellus instructed. "I've come directly from the Senate. There have been significant developments you should be aware of." Quintus finished bandaging Maximus's ribs, then gathered his medical supplies. "We should leave you to speak privately." "Stay," Metellus said. "This concerns all of you." He removed his official cloak, revealing the fatigue beneath his composed exterior. "Cassius has been formally charged with corruption and conspiracy against the Republic. The evidence Livia provided, combined with testimony from several merchants who turned witness against him, was compelling." "Good news at last," Atticus said cautiously. "What of his co-conspirators?" "Drusus has been stripped of his rank in the Praetorian Guard. Several minor officials have been arrested." Metellus's expression remained grave. "However, Sulla has interceded personally regarding Helena." "Let me guess," Maximus said bitterly. "She's been pardoned." "Not exactly. She's been placed under the protection of Sulla's niece, effectively removing her from prosecution while maintaining the appearance of justice." Metellus accepted a cup of wine from Atticus. "Politics is rarely satisfying to those who prefer clear verdicts." "And Livia?" Maximus asked, the question he'd been holding back finally emerging. "Her status?" "Fully restored as a Roman citizen. Her father's estate has been returned to her control." Metellus studied Maximus over the rim of his cup. "She asked me to deliver this to you personally." He withdrew a small scroll sealed with wax bearing the Antonius family emblem. Maximus accepted it but did not open it immediately. "There's more you should know," Metellus continued. "Sulla's health is failing rapidly. His physicians give him months at most. Rome stands at a crossroads, with various factions positioning themselves for the power struggle that will follow his death." "How does this affect us?" Atticus asked. "The moderate faction in the Senate, those who shared Marcus Antonius's vision for reform without civil war, have asked me to lead them." Metellus's voice remained measured, but his eyes revealed his ambition. "With Livia's support as Marcus's heir, we could form a powerful alliance to shape Rome's future." The implication hung in the air. Maximus's fingers tightened around the unopened scroll. "I see," he said quietly. "You fought honorably today," Metellus acknowledged. "Rome respects strength and courage, even in those not born to citizenship. Your status as a freed gladiator has been reaffirmed by Sulla's judgment, however ambiguous. But Rome is not kind to those who exist between worlds. A former gladiator, regardless of his fame, will always be viewed with suspicion by the patrician class." Metellus spoke without cruelty, merely stating political reality. "And any association with Livia Antonius would undermine her restored position at a time when she needs every advantage." Maximus met Metellus's gaze directly. You haven't asked a question, Tribune. No, I haven't. Metellus set down his cup. I respect you too much for such transparent manipulation. I merely present the situation as it stands. Rome, 73 BC. The Colosseum roars as Maximus stands victorious, blood-soaked sand beneath his feet. His opponent lies dead, and with this final kill, he has earned what few gladiators ever taste: freedom. The wooden rudis sword placed in his calloused hands marks the end of his servitude. Yet 3 months later he kneels before a slave trader, voluntarily surrendering the liberty he fought 7 years to achieve. All for her, Livia Antonius, the senator's daughter, now stripped of her nobility and condemned to servitude after a treasonous accusation. Could he truly protect her in a city where emperors themselves aren't safe from daggers in the dark? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crowd's roar washed over Maximus like a physical force. Sweat stung his eyes as he circled his opponent in the blood-soaked arena. 7 years of his life had led to this moment. His 30th victory and the potential for freedom. His opponent, a massive Numidian with skin like polished ebony, brandished a curved blade. They called him the Shadow for his uncanny ability to survive. Today, only one of them would leave the arena. Maximus adjusted his grip on his gladius. The weight of his helmet pressed down, its bronze wolf decoration, the emblem that had earned him the name, the Wolf of Thrace, catching the afternoon sun. His muscles ached from earlier matches, but freedom was worth the pain. Remember, Wolf, Atticus had told him that morning, the old gladiators face a map of scars and wisdom. He favors his right side. A man that size, he'll tire before you. Patience. The Numidian lunged, his blade slicing air where Maximus had stood a heartbeat before. The crowd gasped at the near miss, then cheered as Maximus countered, drawing first blood from his opponent's arm. They're not cheering for you, Atticus always said. They're cheering for death. Never forget that. The Numidian's eyes narrowed above his mask. He was a champion too, a man who'd spilled enough blood to fill a bath. They shared that bond, if nothing else. Men turned into weapons for Rome's entertainment. 3 more passes, 3 more exchanges of steel and skill. Maximus felt the rhythm of the fight, the dance of death he'd mastered through countless battles. The Numidian was slowing, his massive frame requiring more oxygen than Maximus's leaner build. The opening came during the Numidian's powerful but predictable overhead strike. Maximus stepped inside the arc of the blow, too close for the curved blade to find purchase. His own gladius slid between ribs with practiced precision. Their eyes met, a moment of understanding passing between warriors. The Numidian nodded slightly as his lifeblood spilled onto the sand. Maximus withdrew his blade and stepped back, allowing his opponent the dignity of standing as he died. The Numidian dropped to his knees, then fell forward. The crowd erupted in ecstasy. Maximus removed his helmet and turned to face the imperial box where Sulla's representative sat watching. The dictator himself rarely attended the games anymore, preferring to send younger men to represent his authority. The young noble rose, studying Maximus with the calculated gaze of someone appraising livestock. The arena fell silent. Thumbs up. The crowd cheered their approval. But that wasn't the end. The representative held up his hand for silence. The Wolf of Thrace has fought 30 battles and claimed 30 lives, the announcer's voice boomed. Sulla the Fortunate, in his wisdom and mercy, grants this gladiator his freedom. A slave approached carrying a small wooden sword, the rudis. Such a small thing to represent so much. Maximus knelt as tradition demanded, accepting the symbol of his freedom. Later, in the gladiators' quarters, Atticus embraced him. The old man's eyes were wet, though he would deny it if mentioned. You did it, Wolf. You survived. His voice cracked. Few enough of us do. I wouldn't have without your teaching, Maximus replied, examining the rudis in his hands. Simple wood, unadorned. Nothing special to look at, yet more precious than gold. What will you do now? Atticus asked, passing him a cup of watered wine. Maximus drank deeply before answering. I don't know. I was captured at 19. I've been a gladiator longer than I was free. You could train others. Your name would draw students. Maximus shook his head. I've seen enough blood. Then what? Something quiet. Something normal. The word felt strange on his tongue. Normal. What did that even mean for a man who had killed 30 others for the entertainment of crowds? There is no normal for men like us, Wolf, Atticus said gently. But you can find peace, perhaps. That's something. Another strange concept. Maximus wondered if he would recognize it if he found it. The wooden rudis caught the lamplight. Freedom. His to keep or lose as he chose. He had no idea how soon that choice would come. Senator Marcus Antonius adjusted the heavy gold ring bearing his family seal as he listened to the morning's political debates in his atrium. The ring had belonged to his father and his grandfather before that, a symbol of the Antonius legacy stretching back to the early Republic. Sunlight streamed through the opening in the roof, illuminating the impluvium pool beneath and casting rippling reflections on the frescoed walls. The grain shipments from Sicily have been delayed again, reported Flavius, his chief steward. The third time this season. Marcus frowned. Convenient for those who've been hoarding grain to drive up prices. Indeed, Senator. Particularly convenient for Senator Cassius and his associates. Marcus nodded, his suspicions confirmed. Gaius Cassius Longinus, a man of considerable ambition and few scruples. Have our sources confirmed his involvement? Not explicitly, but the pattern is clear. Patterns aren't proof. We need documents, testimony. Marcus rubbed his temples. At 58, he felt the weight of Rome's troubles more acutely than ever. The Republic was fracturing under Sulla's dictatorship, even as the man himself grew ill and reclusive. A musical laugh interrupted his thoughts. His daughter Livia entered the atrium, scrolls tucked under her arm. At 22, she had blossomed into a woman of remarkable intelligence and beauty, with her mother's dark curls and his own penetrating gaze. "Good morning, father," she said, kissing his cheek. "You look troubled." "Politics," he replied with a tired smile. "Nothing for you to worry about." Livia raised an eyebrow. "I'm hardly a child, father. The grain shortages affect everyone, even us sheltered patrician women." Marcus exchanged a glance with Flavius, who discreetly withdrew. "You've been visiting the markets again," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "With proper, however we define it." "To freedom," Livia agreed, "and to choosing it twice."